Hello everyone, my name is Sophie. I'm a 22-year-old living in New York City. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I moved to New York, how I got here, what it's been like, my experience so far, and then tips and tricks on how to move or what more information to move in case you're interested, because for me it was definitely trial and error and it took a long time to get where I'm at, but finally I'm in like such a good place. And so yeah, I want to share that with you. So I knew I was going to move to New York in November of 2019, so last year. I graduated a semester early, so my graduation was in December of 2019, and in November I still didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to move somewhere, and ideally my goal was to be in a big city eventually sometime in my life. It didn't have to be right after college, but I was back home on vacation for the weekend visiting my family because it was my mom's birthday and she had a birthday dinner with all of her friends. So I'm talking to one of her friends, and you know, that question always gets brought up, what are you doing after graduation? And I didn't have an answer because I didn't know. And I told her that I wanted to move to a big city eventually, and she was like, would you want to move to New York? And I was like, yeah, of course. And so she told me that her daughter was moving out of her apartment and she had one roommate, and the roommate was her brother. And so it was close in the family. My parents and their parents are really good friends. And I was like, actually, yeah, maybe, like really considering it. And so I thought about it, and then on the drive back to school, I texted the mom who suggested it to me and asked her how much the rent was going to be. So I'm going to tell you the rent prices because it does play a big role in this story. And so the rent for this one room in a 2-bedroom apartment was going to be $1,400. That's what she told me. And I knew rent prices were expensive here in New York. It's a given. And so I thought, okay, like, I feel like that's normal. I didn't really do much research, but I did know that, you know, rent is expensive. And so I was like, okay, $1,400, like I agree. I will move into that apartment. And so since November of 2019, I knew I was going to be moving to New York City. I've been in New York City for about 4 months now, technically. My move-in day, the day that I moved here, it was March 6th, 2020. At that point, we did not know that everything was going to shut down due to the pandemic. And so I moved here, my mom helped me out, and I spent about 1 week here. And then my mom called me back from California and told me that things are getting pretty serious, places are starting to shut down, and that I should come home to quarantine with the family. So from March 6th to about March 13th, I lived here in New York, and then I hopped on a plane and went back home to California. So when I went back home, I was still paying rent on my apartment here in New York. I live in Brooklyn, and so I was paying my rent on my apartment. All of my stuff was here. So when I went back home to California, I just took one carry-on suitcase, and that was it. I planned on returning. I did all of my job searching for New York City. It took me such a long time. I was looking for environmental positions because that's what I was graduating with. And so finally, in the middle of February of 2020, I got a job as a naturalist. So when I moved here to New York, I had a job, but I was also job searching because the job I got as a naturalist was 4 days a week. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to job search as a server, something in restaurants, just so I can work a little extra and, you know, be able to afford what I want to afford when I move here. The whole first week I was here, I did job search, and you could tell the world was shutting down as I was going to these interviews. Each interview was getting more and more strict. Different things were happening, different things I was being told. My first interview, we hand shook, which was normal. The start date was as soon as possible. And then I started going to more interviews and it was like, let's not handshake. And then eventually it was like, we're not handshaking. And then also, hey, we're gonna shut down for 2 weeks. We'll hire you when we reopen in 2 weeks. Of course, lockdown was a lot longer than that. During the pandemic, I did get laid off from the naturalist position, which I was so bummed about because that was really my dream. So I was back home for about 3 months, and then eventually back in June, I decided it was time to come back to Brooklyn. So when I got back here in June, I didn't have a job because I'd gotten laid off. I was on unemployment. And so I decided to go off unemployment and job search. And so I job searched for so long. It was honestly super defeating. I got hired as a host at a restaurant, which was not paying my bills, and it was very scary. I was pretty much using unemployment that I had saved up during quarantine to pay my rent and to pay for my groceries, different things like that, because I was pretty much making no money, not enough money to even come close to supporting myself. And it was so stressful. And so I was at my first restaurant. I finally got promoted to daytime server, which was more money, but really wasn't enough. And then I applied for a different restaurant. And so eventually, finally, I had interviewed for this position as a project manager and I got hired. And so in September, I started my first day there. And so you could see the timeline from June to September. So when I moved here in March, my roommate at the time never sent me a picture of my apartment. It was honestly like such just a whirlwind roller coaster of events, from feeling lonely because I didn't know anyone to like having so many friends and support, and then being super financially unstable and being so stressed out about that, to now finally having a job. Through these jobs, I met really great people. I met some of my closest friends here in New York through working at those restaurants. And so when I moved, the first day I got there, the day I moved in was the first time I saw the apartment. And it was a basement apartment, which means there was no windows for me to see. We had ceiling windows, so light would come in, but majority was pretty dark and I couldn't see the outside, which honestly was like super depressing. And so I was never home ever because I just didn't want to be there. It was dark. It was like I was living in a cave. And so when I was working at my restaurant, when I first got hired at my restaurant, it was after work. I was hanging out with my coworkers and somehow rent got brought up and they asked me how much I was paying. And initially, I thought I was going to pay $1,400. I told you that's what my roommate's mom had said. But when it came time to pay my first month, I sent him $1,400 and he texted me and he's like, actually, it's $1,600. And my heart dropped. I knew that was just like so expensive. I knew it was way out of my price range. And it took me by surprise. So I was paying that the whole time. And I just kind of blamed it on New York being expensive. I didn't know. I didn't do any research on local housing, renting prices, things like that, because I didn't have to apartment hunt. And so my coworkers, when I told them I was paying $1,600, they were floored. They were like, there's no way you're living in Brooklyn and you're living in a basement and your rent is $1,600. They're like, your roommate has to be scamming you. And I didn't believe it. Like, there was no way in my head that a family friend, someone who's I'm living with, who his parents are so close with my parents, was scamming me. And so I just like disregarded it. I was like, I don't know. It must be nice. I'm not sure. So eventually, I believe in July, there came a point in time where I was like, I can't do this. Like, I am not able to live here anymore. It's way too expensive. I'm going to have to move out. And so one of my really good friends, Justine, who has lived here for 10 years now, who I met at my restaurant, she told me about this app called Roomy, which is here in New York, and you post rooms, you can find people who are also looking for roommates if you want to look together, different things like that. So I went on Roomy and I was looking in the same area I'm living in Brooklyn, and the rent prices were so much cheaper than what I was paying. I was seeing rent from like $900 to like $1,200 for about the same living situation. Not even the same living situation, better living situations. They had windows, you could see outside. A lot of them either had washers and dryers, or like at that point it didn't really matter to me. I was like so depressed, and living in the basement was so horrible. I was like, I'm just looking for a good price in windows, and there was so many different prices. So I knew after looking on Roomy that I was going to be moving out of that apartment right there and then. And so I really didn't know how to go about it, because I figured he is paying a lot of money too. So I was like, do I recommend that like we try to find a new place together? Because also in Manhattan, rent went down a lot because of the pandemic, because a lot of people moved out. And so I was gonna suggest to him that like, hey, like you're fine as a roommate. Let's, like, if you want to find a new place because this place is so expensive, we can find a place together. So I texted him and I was like, hey, when's our rent up? And he texted me back and said that it's month to month, which I didn't know. He never told me. So then I was like, okay, now, like, I'm moving out now. So I texted him back and I was like, he asked me, he said, is there a problem? And I just responded and said, yeah, rent is just so expensive, I need to move out. And his response definitely took me by surprise, and it convinced me that, you know, maybe I was being scammed, because his response was something along the lines that, I can change the price for you. I was like, no, like, I'm moving out. Like, I don't want to, like, there's no way that I can continue to live here with someone that was potentially scamming me. And two, again, it's the basement. It was so depressing. I just did not want to live there anymore. So I went on a job hunt and I found my place that I'm in now, and I have amazing windows. The price is amazing. I'm now paying $1,100. I have a backyard and I have a washer and dryer in my unit. So it's a lot better situation. So I found this place and I signed the lease, and I was supposed to move in at the end of July. A week before I was supposed to move in, maybe it was 2 weeks before I was supposed to move in, I was on FaceTime with my sister, and I must have bumped up against my desk or something, because I looked at my arm and there was like this green fuzzy mold all over it. I was freaking out. I'm like, what did I touch? What's going on? Where did this come from? Because I'm looking around, I don't see anything. And so at that point, I didn't see anything. So I was just like, I cannot wait to move out of this building. 2 days later, I'm looking at my desk and I see mold everywhere. And so I'll insert pictures right now, but I'm seeing mold everywhere, all over my desk. I had a storage bed. I lifted up my bed. It was all on the wood panels. I had winter clothes underneath my bed for storage. I had mold all over my winter clothes, on boots, on jackets, on sweaters, on swimsuits, like mold everywhere. And I was like, I can't stay here. And so what ended up happening was I packed pretty much all my stuff. I stayed at my friend Justine's for like 3 nights, and I moved in early to this place because I didn't have health insurance at the time. And so there was no way I'd be able to be staying in an apartment with mold. I can't afford to get sick. With all of that happening, I am now here in my apartment with finally a full-time job, and I couldn't be happier. Definitely patience was key during this time, which I learned a lot about. To make friends here, I walked around my community a lot. I would walk to the park, I would walk on the water, I would go and work out and just kind of like observe. I spent all of my time at the parks, because that was like my happy place. It was where I didn't get any social interaction because, you know, we were in the middle of a pandemic, no one's really meeting people. But I got to see it happen, which sounds so weird, but like it definitely gave me a nice break and gave me something a little bit more fulfilling than just staying at home. As I was walking around, I started seeing these people cleaning up trash, and I was like, that's something I want to be a part of. And so I one day was walking to the park and I saw two people approaching me, and they had trash bags and gloves, and they're all wearing masks. And I was like, I need to ask them what they're doing. And they passed me and I didn't say anything, and I was like, dang it. And so 3 more people were coming doing the same thing, and I was like, okay, this is my time, I have to do it. And they came up and they passed me, and I was like, dang it, I didn't say anything. And so finally there was one last person, and I was like, I gotta do it, this is the last one. And so I stopped him and I asked him what he was doing and if they were just a group of friends or if it was an organization. And so he linked me to their Instagram page. They're amazing. They do neighborhood cleanups. It transforms the community for sure. It started during the pandemic and it really just grew the community closer. And so that was one way I met people here. And after I met those people and like was super busy at both the restaurants I was working at, I wasn't feeling so alone anymore. Well, now I'm gonna give you guys some tips moving to New York City. Some things I didn't know before I moved here. Obviously, it was a lot of trial and error. And so my number one tip, and I mentioned this earlier, is use Roomy. Like, even if you're not looking to move in with someone, or you have a friend here or anything like that, using Roomy really gives you a good idea and perspective of what other people are paying here in the city. Through Roomy, you can either, you know, sign on to a new lease with people you meet on there, or another thing I can recommend is subletting. Subletting is a good route to go if you're not sure where you want to live, if you're not sure how long you want to stay here, because it's a very short-term commitment. Some are a month to several months. It's like a really good idea. So definitely check out Roomy. To do your, like, and this kind of goes hand in hand with Roomy, do your research on rent prices in the areas that you're trying to live, even if you know that you're moving in with someone, because that's what I thought. Obviously, I didn't do my research because I didn't think I had to. Like, I didn't think I was going to be scammed by a family friend, but I guess anything happens, you never know. Making friends, obviously work is a really good place to do that. Previously I mentioned about the cleanup group that I volunteer with, and I would just say any type of volunteering is a great way to put yourself out there and meet new people. There are so many different Instagram pages in different neighborhoods and boroughs that really keep you up to date on what's happening in your area. And a lot of these Instagrams will post organizations that help out in the community, so you're able to get involved. Facebook groups are a really good idea too. I'm in a couple Facebook groups that I personally haven't met anyone from it, but I know people that have like posted in these Facebook groups and has asked if anyone wants to hang out, and it normally works out. It's really good. So definitely use your resources, use the internet, use social media, because you never know. Also, reaching out to mutual friends, people from college, posting on your Facebook. There's so many people here that have recommended reaching out to their friends that they know in the city to meet up with me. Moving during a pandemic was obviously really hard. It was very uncertain of what was going to happen. When I moved back here in June, I was really nervous about making friends because no one wanted to go near each other. It was like people were hardly even seeing their friends at the point I got back here, let alone meeting new people. I also was unemployed when I moved back, and so it was definitely very, very uncertain, but I feel like I've definitely been lucky with the people I've met and the experiences I've made, and I honestly wouldn't have traded it for anything. I feel like people now here in the city, at least in Brooklyn, are super genuine. They really want to help and encourage the community. I've seen a lot more unity here than I have really even expected to happen. I have met so many great people here, and like I said, it's definitely been a roller coaster journey, but I'm here now. And so all is good. I'm honestly just so happy to be here. I have those moments of just like stepping back and seeing like, wow, I really do live in New York City. And so if you're thinking to move to a big city or anything like that, I definitely recommend doing it. It definitely pushes you out of your comfort zone, but I think that's really good. I've already being here for 4 or 5 months have grown so much as a person. I hope you enjoyed my journey of being in New York so far, and I hope you think that some of the tips I gave were helpful. Thank you so much for watching.